5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hey, Shagheads! Curtis Tucker here, aka Shags, for another exciting episode of the Curtis Tucker Podcast. I appreciate you guys checking in. If you guys are listening to this podcast on your favorite app, don't forget you can go to youtube.com/@CurtisTucker. You can see me waving at you. You can see the background of Shaggy Duck Studio. I've been doing a lot of work, making a lot more room here in the studio. I've added some fun little lights back there that you guys can see. Some new stuff on the walls. Anyway, you can see a little bit of that on the video on YouTube, and I will be doing just a YouTube video showing the studio, all the different aspects and areas of it as soon as I get it completely done. I think the studio is completely done. It's that little room next attached to it that I've got a little bit of work to do on. And if you guys are watching on YouTube, if you just happen to find me there, don't forget that if you're in a position where you can't watch, don't forget you can listen on your favorite podcasting app. So if there is a podcasting app out there that you cannot find the Curtis Tucker Podcast, let me know and I will get on there. So don't forget to subscribe to both the YouTube channel and subscribe to the podcast. All that helps me, helps new people find me if you guys subscribe and I get a bigger audience. So anyway, thanks for checking in. Again, I'm gonna try to keep getting a new episode every week. This is a Thursday night, and tomorrow, big storm coming in, I guess, across a large amount of states, but really slamming Oklahoma tomorrow and on Saturday. So getting ready for the big snowstorm here in Oklahoma. And so I thought I would throw out a podcast episode. This is kind of a combination of some other things that I've talked about. I've talked about my favorite songs, my playlist of 100 songs. And then I also talked about an episode where there's certain points in time where people remember where they were when certain things happened. And so this is kind of a combination of those two deals, and I've talked about some of these songs before, but this is all about songs that you hear that take you to a specific moment in time or remind you of something. I think we all, especially us baby boomers and Generation Jones, we all have those set of songs that take us way back to the day and kind of remind us of a certain point in time or person or event. And so I'm going to kind of go through mine. And this list I just kind of thought of fairly quickly. So I'm sure if I really thought about it, I could add probably another half dozen, and they'll probably pop into my mind after I get the episode done, but that's okay. I'm just going to read off the ones that I had jump into my mind right away. And they're in no particular order. They are not by date or any of that. They're just kind of as they popped into my head. And I don't have the exact year on some of them, and some of them I don't even have who the singer was, but I think you guys are going to know who most of these are. So let's hop into it. This should be titled something like Songs That Take Me Back to an Exact Moment in Time. Number one, always remember this every time Funky Town comes on. Do you guys remember Funky Town? Well, you know, it kind of had a really happy, fast, upbeat speed to it. And so anyway, one time I was driving in Enid, Oklahoma, down Oakwood Road, right in front of Glenwood Elementary School, and I was speeding, and a policeman pulled out of the grade school and pulled me over and gave me my first speeding ticket because I was listening to Funky Town. So I cannot hear Funky Town without thinking of getting my first speeding ticket. The song Harden My Heart by Quarter Flash. You don't hear that song very much anymore, but that was a huge song when I was in junior college. And so me and Brian Engelking we used to drive around, around the campus and around Tonkawa, just kind of cruising. And there was one point where two girls, Brenda and Janine, would kind of go cruising with us, and that song would come on the radio, and the chorus kind of goes, "Hard My Heart," and we would all four sing it in the car. So every time "Harden My Heart" by Quarterflash comes on, it reminds me of driving around, cruising northern Oklahoma College in Tonkawa, and that would have been 81, 82. "Carry On Wayward Son," that song, I cannot hear that song without thinking of our garage band in high school. We had a five-man rock band, 70s rock band, and that was like our favorite song to do. So every practice we sang "Carry On Wayward Son." It was, Kansas was one of our favorite groups. And so that song always reminds me of the group. And I've got just a few cassettes, bad quality cassettes of recording songs that we did. And that is one of the songs that we probably recorded 15 times because I've got lots of recordings of it. So every time I hear "The Night Chicago Died" and "Billy, Don't Be a Hero," both of those, they had to have come out or been popular about the same time, because every time I hear either one of those songs, it reminds me of Eric Wright. Eric was a kid that I hung out with actually before Staten moved to Enid, and it was kind of, at that age we heard songs on the radio and heard songs on television, but those were like the first two songs. I think he or his brother had those songs like on a 45 or something, and so it's like those were the first two songs that I kind of remember actually listening to that weren't just randomly hearing it on the radio. So it always reminds me of Eric Wright, and being, early 70s. "Hot Child in the City" and "Kiss You All Over." Both of those songs were on the jukebox at Ken's Pizza when we were in high school. So at that time, you were able to leave high school and go eat lunch somewhere. And of course, we did every day. I think I might have eaten lunch in the high school cafeteria maybe 3 times in 3 years, maybe. So Ken's Pizza, they had I think it was like a couple of dollar buffet, and they always had the thin crust pizza. So we would run over there and eat a couple of slices of pizza and put money in the somebody put money in the jukebox, and "Hot Child in the City" and "Kiss You All Over." Both of those songs would come on, and so they always remind me of eating pizza at Ken's Pizza. And a lot of these are like in groups of two, because when I hear one song, I always think of the other song, and then both songs always remind me of, whatever it is. And so "Magnet" and "Steel" and "Life's Been Good," both of those songs remind me, I think it was the summer of 1978. It was the summer of 78, and that was the summer that we hung out at Oakwood Country Club swimming pool. Mike Stearman, who kind of hung out with us, he wasn't in our band, but he kind of hung out with the band. His parents were members of Oakwood Country Club at the time, and so we would walk from his house to the country club and spend all afternoon there. We'd get baked and be sunburned, and they played, radio songs over the speakers, and those were two of the biggest songs that summer. And so every time I hear one of those songs, I think of that summer of us. And it was usually, I think, Mike, Staten, and I that hung out there. I think Todd was roofing for his dad, and so he didn't get to hang out with us too much. "Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head." That reminds me of my mom. Driving around, going with her places in her 67 Thunderbird. She had an 8-track tape player, and the one that she usually kept in the 8-track was, and I can't think of who sang it. It just popped out of my head. Anyway, he sang "Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head." And so every time I hear that song, I not only think of 8 tracks, but I think of riding around in my mom's 67 Thunderbird. American Pie, that's a very long song, and I just remember hearing that song over and over and over because Brendan Hedges had it on 45, and we used to hang out in his mansion, that big huge mansion on West Broadway, and on the third floor it was kind of a the whole third floor was like a huge playroom. It had the round wall that we used to sign, and it had a pool table up there and a train set and a record player. And I think one of the only records that he had up there was American Pie. So I think we would put that record on and it would play to the end and then start over. And so I think we listened to it a gazillion times. Goodbye Girl, that's a great song, fun movie. Every time that I hear that song, it reminds me of going to the movie, and that was kind of during that, it was kind of a cool time period for us when we were going to a lot of movies in junior high and early high school at the Video Twin. And it was right before we were able to drive, so somebody would drive us over there and we would go to the Video Twin and see a movie, and then we would cross the street and go eat at Pizza Inn and meet girls there, and then sometimes we'd go to the arcade. But Goodbye Girl was one of those movies, and Warriors and Phantasm and what's that comedy? If I don't have it written down, I don't remember it. Anyway, it was that whole period of time when those movies, but it always reminds me of going to the Video Twin and eating pizza afterwards on the weekend. Goodbye Girl. Convoy, one of Todd's favorite songs. Convoy always reminds me of Staten Pettyjohn. I think we had gotten, maybe we'd gotten something like a Walkman or something that had, we had something that had headphones, I think. And I just remember hanging out at the church that we went to, the youth group we went to at the time, at the Christian Church of the Covenant. And for some reason, Staten's parents, they, served doing volunteer and work and stuff there at the church. So sometimes we would end up at the church waiting on Staten's dad to do stuff. And I just remember one time when Convoy was really, really popular, Staten and I would listen to it a lot, but I just remember listening to it over and over at that church, listening, sharing his headphones or something for some reason. But so that Convoy always reminds me of hanging out there, hanging out with Staten. The Hustle and Fly Robin Fly, both of those songs remind me of my sister way back in the day. And it was kind of right in that time, right before I started buying my own music. And I think she was buying her own music. And she had a record player. I may not even had a record player at that time. So two of her 45s were The Hustle and Fly Robin Fly. So I can't not hear those songs and think about her in her room listening to those two songs, playing them over and over and over again. 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover. That song always takes me back to junior high. It was super popular in junior high, and I remember kids singing it in class and in the halls. Keely, sneak out the back, Jack. Anyway, just seems like it was one of those songs everybody was singing in junior high. 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover. Suicide is Painless. If you didn't know, that is actually the name of the theme song for MASH, and it was the theme song for the movie MASH and the theme song for the sitcom MASH. And that song not only always reminds me of MASH, but it reminds me of my mom because she was a huge MASH fan. And every evening in Oklahoma, and I think pretty much everywhere, there was the 10 o'clock news, and in our area it was ABC, and then at 10:30 there was MASH reruns on every night for ever. I mean, had to be a decade or more. And so even when I moved away from home, and when I was at college, I would pretty much watch the news and then watch MASH and go to bed, and that was just kind of the deal. So Suicide is Painless reminds me of MASH. A song called Unwritten by Natasha Bedingfield, and then Come Clean, which was the theme for Laguna Beach. Those two songs both remind me of the time right after I quit my job when I was the advertising director at Evans Drug. I started making enough money online, and we had just had both daughters, and I had been taking them to work, and so it just seemed like it would be easier if I stayed home and took care of the girls at home and started my own business. So I quit my job as advertising director at Evans Drug, started my Shaggy Duck business, stayed home with the girls, and then we didn't have to pay daycare. And so it was when I first got my home office, and I would flip the TV on while I was working. It was kind of background noise. And Laguna Beach, I guess I must have watched reruns or recorded episodes of Laguna Beach, and those were the two songs that were played a lot during that period. And so for some reason, it just reminds me of when I started Shaggy Duck and had my own home studio for the first time. Missing You by Tom Waite, that reminds me of a girl that I dated at Central State University, and not really because I missed her, but it just was a popular song at that time. So it reminds me of when I was going through all those art classes at Central State and going on dates with her. So All For You and All For You by Sister Hazel, and Push and 3 a.m., all three of those songs, Push and 3 a.m. by Matchbox 20, all of those songs remind me of when I was dating Denise. And so after we started dating, we were dating in Enid, and then she moved down to Oklahoma City to go to dental hygiene school, and I ended up moving down there. We got married. Well, we were dating, and we were kind of both going back and forth, and then we got married, and I moved down there with her, but then I commuted and drove back up to Enid for a year while she finished school, and I was still working at Evans. But during that time on the radio was All For You, 3 a.m. and Push, and so they remind me of when Denise and I first started dating and first got married, and that whole time when I was driving back and forth. So fun songs. The Warrior theme, that always reminds me of hanging out with the guys. Again, it was during that really cool period of when we went to a lot of movies at the Video Twin, late junior high, early high school. Warriors was one of those movies. And I don't even have to see the movie. It's just hearing the theme. If you haven't seen The Warriors, or you don't really know what I'm talking about, find The Warriors, and at the beginning of the movie, listen to that song. And they play parts of that score throughout the movie, so you hear it a lot. So it just reminds me of the good times of junior high, early high school, going to the movies, again, eating at Pizza Inn, meeting girls there, hanging out at the arcade, playing Asteroids. Another song, Tell Me What You Want by Zebra and Eyes Without a Face. Both of those songs remind me of Staten and the time when we moved down to South Texas and worked at the door factory. So one summer, he and I decided to hang out for the summer, and his parents had moved down to South Texas, and so in between years in college, he was going to head down there and spend the summer with his parents. And so I decided to go down with him, and his mom had gotten us a job at a door making factory. And so those were songs that we listened to, and Eyes Without a Face was always on the radio when we would drive from Yorktown to Cuero. The door factory was in Cuero, and that was that time where he and I, it was, you worked 10-hour shifts for 4 days, and then you got off 3 days. And but it was assembly line. It was so boring. We only lasted a week, so he and I quit after a week. I think it was a week. Could have been 2 weeks, but I think it was a week. He and I quit, and luckily his dad took pity upon us and hired us to work on their ranch for the summer. And so he and I built fence, painted the house, did repair all kinds of stuff around the ranch, and that was our summer job, was working for his dad. But those two songs remind me of that time period being down there in South Texas. Against All Odds, that song is from the movie Against All Odds, and that movie and that song remind me of living in Stillwater. And when I was living in Stillwater, I lived with Brian Ingle King and a couple other guys in a house, and Brian and I would hang out, and I remember he and I going to the movie in Stillwater to see Rachel. I can't remember her last name, Rachel. Anyway, the nice looking actress in Against All Odds. But so anytime I hear that song, reminds me of Brian Ingle King and living in Stillwater. This is a song most of you are not going to know. It's called Sheila by the Producers. And that was a song that Staten turned me onto. And after high school, his parents took us down to Nuevo Laredo, right across the border into Mexico. And we hung out in Mexico for a couple of days. And we got some fun, wild stories from down there. But Staten had just gotten into the Producers, and he had that song, and so we listened to Sheila the whole time on that trip, all the way down there while we were there, and then all the way back. And so that song, which you never hear it on the radio. I don't think it ever made the radio, but every time I hear that song, I think of Staten and hanging out in Mexico for that vacation. The song Years From Now by Dr. Hook. That song reminds me of Denise and our wedding, because that was our first dance wedding song. So every time I hear that, I think of our wedding and our reception at Oakwood Country Club here in Enid, and having all of our family and friends there and dancing to that song. This song, without a doubt, it's probably at the top of my list for songs that remind me of something so vivid that it'll never go away, and that's Sunshine on My Shoulders. And that is a song, it reminds me of Staten, and it's a John Denver song. And so when Staten and I first met in 6th grade, we started hanging out, and Staten played guitar. He played acoustic, and it was required to have music class, and so our music teacher was trying to get us as a class. We were singing songs, and we were going to go to Tonkawa. This was in 6th grade, so it's funny, we went to a talent competition in Tonkawa, NOC, where I eventually went to college. But anyway, so we went up there, and I think as a group we went and sang. But Staten, some of the kids did solos, and Staten was one of the kids that did a solo. Well, his song was Sunshine on My Shoulders, and so he was always practicing. So hanging out with Staten there in 75, I heard Sunshine on My Shoulders a lot. And it just always reminds me of Staten and the talent competition. One Headlight by the Wallflowers. That was kind of my transitional period for me from one relationship to another, where I went about a year when I was single, hanging out with the guys, kind of doing the bar scene almost every night, becoming barflies. But right at the end, middle to end of that, One Headlight and from the Wallflowers came out. That whole album came out, and so that was kind of a cool, fun period of time. It was right before Denise and I started dating. I think I'd gone out on a couple dates with another girl, and we would hang out at the Frisco. We'd always go to the Frisco and drink beer, and then they closed at 10, and then at 10 we'd go to the Ramada and stay until 2. And so that was just one of those songs during that period of time. So fun times. It was, Todd and Bert and just that whole gang of guys from that time. REO Speedwagon, Roll with the Changes. I just gotten into REO Speedwagon, and I think it was their double live album that had all of their hits on it, and this was one of those hits. And it reminds me of hanging out with Steve Voss, David Thorpe, Kyle Dowers, all those guys from the Emmanuel Youth Group. They came and kidnapped me one evening. They were at youth group and had gotten done with youth group or something, and they came and got me, and I went riding around with them, and basically for the next, I think, year or two, we hung out together and went to youth group and did all kinds of crazy stuff. Went to church camp 2 years in a row, and it was just, that was during that time period that I listened to a lot of REO, and Roll with the Changes was one of my favorite REO songs, and so that reminds me of that. There's a song called, I think it's called Prawn, Praan. It's by somebody named Gary Shyman, Schyman, and it sounds like a girl singing like she might be from India, or kind of a Bollywood type song. Anyway, there was a guy that used to do videos. Where the heck is, I can't remember. Dang it, my memory is gone. Anyway, there was this guy that I think Wrigley Gum paid for him to go to different countries, and he would dance, and then he would have a whole bunch of people from that country all of a sudden come up behind him and start dancing with him. He'd do this funny little dance, and he basically would transition from the video from one country to the next country to the next country, and he'd be like a 3-minute video where he like went and danced in like 50 countries. And this was like before social media. It was just barely taken off, and I think maybe this was more of a YouTube type deal. But anyway, that song is the song that he played in his video when he was dancing. And so that was when I was working, again, fairly close to when I started working from home. And I would make videos with the girls. Again, this was kind of before, this was way before TikTok and any of that stuff. So the girls were really little. I was a stay-at-home dad, and I would get the girls to come into my office, and we would do goofy little videos, and that was one of the songs that we played, that we danced to. And so Praan, it's actually a pretty good song. I have no idea, zero idea what the person singing is saying. I just like the song, and it reminds me of hanging out with my little girls when they were little. So the song Feeling That Way by Journey always reminds me of Kyle Sherm and living in the dorm. He was my roommate in the dorm at NOC in Tonkawa, and he had that album. And so not only would we play that album on his turntable, but it was also, I think around that time, it was still pretty popular on the radio. And so every time I hear that song, I think of living in the dorm with Kyle in Tonkawa. Caribbean Queen, that song reminds me of Steve Voss and living in the dorm at Central State University, where he was my roommate there. Now, I didn't stay in that room very often because it wasn't very long after we got there to college that I had a girlfriend. And so, but when I would go in, that song was always being played, and then Steve was off doing so. It seems like we were roommates, but we rarely saw each other. But that reminds me of going to school at Central State. Fox on the Run by Sweet. That is kind of the first song that I really thought, wow, this rock and roll music is like really cool. I just thought that was like a cool rock song, and it just reminds me of hanging out. So when we lived on West Broadway, we rented a 2-story house, and I had the whole top floor to myself. Well, the whole top floor was like a huge playroom, a bedroom, a big walk-in closet, and a bathroom. And I just remember hanging out there, up there in my room, and I would listen to Fox on the Run a lot. And that was back in the day when I didn't ever have the record or the album or the cassette or anything, but we would make those mixtapes. And so I would, every time it would come on the radio, I would record it on my mixtape. And, you know, so usually there was 5 seconds missing from the front of it all the time. But so then I'd get it on cassette, and then I would just listen to it over and over and over. I thought it was a really cool song back in the day. I Want You to Want Me by Cheap Trick. I remember when that came out. That was during the time period when my mom would drive us to school. I can remember cruising down, and I think we'd pick up Staten, because I kind of remember cruising down West Broadway, and I Want You to Want Me, you know, I'd probably pop out her 8-track and turn it on the radio so we could hear some radio songs. I also remember Don't Look Back was popular on the radio then. So both of those songs, they not only remind me of my mom driving us to school, but picking up Staten being in the back seat, and basically just early high school before we got our license to drive. The theme from Charlie Brown, if you guys didn't know, the theme from Charlie Brown is actually called Linus and Lucy. And I cannot hear that song without thinking of being a little kid watching the Charlie Brown holiday specials, because they played it, I think, in every special. I think it was played in Thanksgiving, Halloween, and Christmas. And then the jazz album from the Christmas special is the #2 best-selling jazz album of all time, and I've got it. So anyway, I can't hear that song without thinking of being a kid all through the 70s, making sure we watched Charlie Brown every year. Because if you didn't watch it, you missed it until the next year. The songs Get Right Back, which was Maxine Nightingale, and Don't Go Breaking My Heart, Elton John and Kiki D. Both of those songs remind me of building the maze in Staten's garage. We had a little radio, and so that was where we got our music. And so, I mean, we would spend hours and hours in there crawling through the maze and taping cardboard boxes and putting scary stuff in there. And it was just during that time period. Both of those songs were top 40 songs on the radio, so they got played a lot. And they are just specifically 2 of the songs, for some reason, that I remember during that period that takes me back to the old maze days. And then the last one on my list is 3 Times a Lady. And that reminds me of Todd. I remember when we first met Todd, we'd go over to his house and hang out, and I just kind of remember him always singing that song. You know how on our podcast he's always singing on every episode? Well, he's been doing that since junior high. And so he always sang 3 Times a Lady, especially if it came on the radio. And so that always reminds me of hanging out with Todd and spending the night at his house. We'd spend the night at his house a lot because he lived kind of on a weird dead-end street right behind our junior high, which had a big football field. And so after his parents would fall asleep, we would sneak out of the house and go to the football field and the junior high, and just kind of run around the neighborhood late at night. So anyway, so those are my, I don't know if there's a name for them, but those are the songs that when I hear, throw me back to a period of time, an event, a person, just something like that. And I know, like I said, I know there's probably half a dozen to a dozen more if I really, really thought about it. But those are the ones that I just know that I'm just always reminded when those songs come on. And even those songs, even though I have a lot of those songs on my playlist, and I went through a period where I listened to them a lot, even listening to them now a lot has not dulled the memory of taking them, taking me back to a period of time. And I don't listen to them as much now as I did for a little while there. So now, when they do pop back on, it does take me right back to wherever I was talking about. So let me know what songs really take you back or remind you of somebody or something or some event or a certain year. Let me know, and send me an email, shags@shaggyduck.com or curtis@curtistucker.com. Nobody send me an email. Somebody send me an email and let me know that you're listening. I appreciate you guys listening. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast when you listen to it on your favorite podcasting app, and then you get notified when I get new episodes. And subscribe to my YouTube channel, because I need to get to a certain level of subscribers before I can make money on there, and I have to have like a certain number of hours watched per month. I mean, it's going to take me forever to get that level. I'm 63 now. I might be 73 before I get to that level, and I'm not necessarily doing it just for the subscribers and the money, but if I'm going to be doing it, it'd be kind of cool to make a couple of bucks. So subscribe to the YouTube channel. Again, youtube.com/@CurtisTucker. And just let me know your thoughts. If you have some podcasting episode ideas, let me know. Would love to find a niche or a hot topic that I could do like maybe once a month or something. And if there's certain guests, or if any of you guys that are listening have something to talk about, would like to be on the podcast, let me know. And I apologize for it not being like a regular day. I think once I get in a groove, I will finally pick a day that I record, most likely Wednesday or Thursday nights, and then it will be available that next day on a weekly basis. And so appreciate you guys sticking with me, and go to curtistucker.com. What I do is I turn the podcast and the video, I embed those on a blog post on my Curtis Tucker blog, and then I have Chat GPT these days. I have it I tell it what the episode was about, and it writes a little blog post for me, which doesn't fit exactly with the podcast, but that way you can read what I talked about, you can listen to what I'm talking about, and you can also click on the video, all there at curtistucker.com. So go check that out. I appreciate you, and I'm gonna get out of here. See ya.